Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel, Unfortunate Ends, where we talk about people who, as the name suggests, have had tragic and unfortunate ends to their life. And in today's video, we'll be looking at the life of Daniel Parke Jr. I hope you enjoy. Daniel Parke Jr. was known as one of the most notorious scamps of the colonial period. He lacked parental guidance in his youth, as both of his parents died when he was still a young boy. Unlike most children of his time, Parke Jr. inherited a substantial fortune from his father in lands and slaves. This huge inheritance made him independent and prominent in society. However, his hostile and corrupt nature as the governor of the Leeward Islands would cause his untimely death. Daniel Parke Jr. was born on September 5, 1664, in York County, Virginia. He was the son of Daniel Parke, a native of Essex, who at the time held several offices in Virginia. His mother, Rebecca Evelyn, was the daughter of George Evelyn, Lord of the Manor of Evelington in St. Mary's County, Maryland. She was also the cousin of the popular English writer John Evelyn. Sadly, both of Parke's parents died when he was still a young boy. His mother died in 1672 at Long Ditton in Surrey, England, when Parke was 8 years old, while his father followed 7 years later, on March 6, 1679. As a wise man who had planned a bright future for his son, Parke Sr. had written a will, which indicated that a portion of his wealth, most of which was invested at the Chamber of London, was to be used in educating and raising his son. Young Parke spent his childhood with his relatives from the Evelyn family in England, at the family seat in Long Ditton, Surrey. Here, Micaiah Perry and Thomas Lane, who owned the merchant house Perry and Lane, were to be Daniel's guardians. This was before he returned to York County, Virginia, the place of his birth, in the 1680s, where James Bray and Robert Cobb were to look after him. After Parke's father's death, his inheritance, including his father's estates in Virginia, were taken over by Philip Ludwell, Parke's guardian, also the chief of the Green Spring faction. Daniel was sent back to Virginia at the age of 16, leaving behind his cousins with whom they had grown together, building fun childhood memories. Ludwell at this time was not ready to lose Parke's estate, and hence took advantage of the little boy by marrying him to Jane Ludwell. However, when Daniel grew older and wiser, he rejected his guardian, neglected his wife, and never agreed to anything Ludwell proposed. In 1680, Daniel Parke Jr. was married to Jane Ludwell, daughter of Philip Ludwell and Lucy Higginson. The young couple, both about 16 years old at the time, later gave birth to 3 daughters, 2 of whom survived to adulthood, Frances Parke and Lucy Parke. It was not long before Parke succeeded in his political career in Virginia. His father-in-law, who by then was married to the widow of the governor, William Berkeley, plus his fortunes, greatly contributed to Parke's success. Another great contributor to Parke's rise was his cousin, John Evelyn, who constantly petitioned English officials on his behalf. In 1688, Parke was elected to the House of Burgesses for James City County. In 1693, both James City and York counties appointed him to serve as Burgess, but chose to represent James City County, and later, in 1695, represented New Kent County. At the age of 27, Parke had made major milestones for his age. He was a well-known investor at Yorktown by 1691, and a member of the committee for Bruton Parish Church in Williamsburg between 1649 and 1697. Later, Parke became a member of the Council of the Governor on June 11, 1695, and a trustee for the College of William and Mary from 1696 to 1697. Parke was not only talented in politics, but was also arrogant and ambitious, characteristics that made him create enemies in his career as a politician. In one incident, James Blair, the Commissioner of Virginia, referred to Parke as a complete sparkish gentleman, and often complained of what he called his quick resentment to every least thing that looks like an affront or injury. On another occasion, Parke was accused of whipping the governor of Maryland after he challenged him to a battle. On a different incident, Parke is said to have engaged in a quarrel with James Blair's wife at Bruton Parish Church. He pulled her from the pew used by the Harrison family and insulted her, probably because he considered it to be his pew since it was used by the Ludwell family, from which Parke had married. It was this kind of arrogance that made the Virginia governors complain about their unnoticed powers and the attitude of the Virginia gentry. In 1697, Parke was unhappy in his marriage and decided to divorce his wife, Jane Ludwell. After this, Parke abandoned his family in Virginia, leaving behind his 2 daughters to find a new career in England. He had hoped to be elected as a Member of Parliament, yet he lost the election in his constituency, so he had to search for a new vocation. In 1702, Parke applied for a military career by purchasing a commission in the British Army after he failed to secure a parliamentary seat. Throughout the War of Spanish Succession, he stood out as a skillful soldier and won honours as aide-de-camp to John Churchill, 1st Duke of Marlborough, which gave him an added advantage for his newly aspired career. Then, in 1604, Marlborough selected him to be a personal advisor to Queen Anne of England during the Battle of Blenheim. The Queen was impressed by his devotion and record of service, and awarded him with a jewel containing the Queen's portrait, in addition to a £1,000 token, and personally expressed her gratitude. Parke also claimed Marlborough had promised him the governorship of Virginia as an appreciation for his exemplary service in the military. Unfortunately, Parke realised his awaiting new position had been awarded to someone else, making him furious. As a result, he felt betrayed and appealed for an equivalent office, becoming the governor of the Leeward Islands. He had no choice but to accept, saying it was the hardest task with the least salary. Even though Parke was not pleased, since he had aspired to become the governor of Virginia, this appointment was still very prominent, as Parke became one of the first few Southern colonials who served as governors in their own right. Parke spent the remaining part of his life in the Caribbean, serving as the governor, although his term was a short one. He was hostile to most of the leading citizens of Antigua and claimed to maintain the royal powers while concealing illegal profits he was making through smuggling. His subjects complained about his mean behaviour and refusal to consider any of their opinions. Therefore, his popularity in Antigua was quickly compromised, leading to a riot where Lieutenant Governor Johnson was the victim. During this period, Parke himself escaped 2 assassination attempts and took advantage of his power to use the island's troops against his determined enemies. After several attempts to take his life, Parke was still not shaken by his enemies' threats and continued to rule with his notoriety. Later, a petition was presented to remove Parke from the office. It was successful, and Parke received orders recalling him to England. Yet, as expected, Parke was not going to easily comply with the decision. He courageously ignored the order and went ahead to dissolve the island's assembly. Often, Parke could misuse his political powers to acquire wealth and mistreat the weak in the society, leading to more hatred from his subjects. For instance, he illegally acquired assets owned by Christopher Codrington, an earlier administrator of the colony, who in turn incited the people to attack Parke. To make matters worse, Parke had taken Edward Chester's wife to be his mistress, and publicly acknowledged her newborn child as his blood. Chester was the local broker of the Royal African Company. Parke went on to add the child as a beneficiary of his fortune, stirring a more personal enmity with Chester. Other grievances against Parke was his hostile personal conduct and allegations that he had illegally enriched himself by confiscating vessels, hiding wills to buy unclaimed estates, and threatening others not to challenge his bids for slaves, lands, and cattle. He was accused of seducing the wives and daughters of local Antigua planters, leading to a rebellion by the residents. On December 7th, 1710, an angry mob snatched Parke from the governor's residence, beat him severely, and dragged his wounded body outside. His killers abandoned his body in the streets for a week, to rot after his cruel death. As he lay helplessly dying, he uttered his last words to his tormentors, probably hoping they would miraculously receive little shreds of mercy and save him. He said, "Gentlemen, you have no sense of honor left. Pray, have some humanity." Yet it was of no use, and he died at the age of 40. None of Parke's murderers were charged for this cruel act, even after his successor, Walter Douglas, took the post of governor. Jane Ludwell Parke had earlier died in September 1708 in Virginia, leaving behind her daughters Lucy Parke Bird and Frances Parke Custis, married to William Bird and John Custis respectively. Unlike Parke Sr., Parke Jr. did not gather much wealth for his two daughters, and only left a modest inheritance for Lucy and Frances. He left behind large debts which were settled by Bird and Curtis, who also looked after his Virginia and England estates. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for watching this video on Daniel Parke Jr. I hope you enjoyed, and let me know if you think he was deserving of his unfortunate end. If you have any suggestions, you can find my email down in the description. And anyway, that's all from me, so I'll see all of you in the next unfortunate end. Thanks.